He was a powerful millionaire who thought money could buy anything, even a new mother for his daughter. 5 elegant, wealthy women stood before her, each desperate to be chosen. But when the moment came, she turned away from them all and pointed to someone no one expected. The black housekeeper who had spent her life working in silence suddenly became the center of a storm. Whispers turned to outrage, and prejudice reared its ugly head. Why would a child choose love where the world only saw division? And what would happen when society refused to accept it? The mansion sat high on the hill, an island of wealth where the gates seemed designed to keep the world out. To the millionaire who owned it, the walls were more than stone and steel. They were proof of his success. He had built an empire, forged with ambition and sacrifice, and now stood as one of the most powerful men in the city. But all that wealth could not fill the silence that lingered in the halls. His wife was gone, and in her absence, his daughter was left with an emptiness money could never soothe. She was a child of privilege, dressed in fine silk, raised in luxury, but her heart carried a hunger her father could not see. He believed stability came from appearances, that order came from control, and that healing came through structure. So he devised a plan, as he always did. His daughter would choose a new mother, someone who could step into the role as seamlessly as one might fill a vacant position in his company. 5 women were invited into their lives, each wealthy, each carefully selected, each presented like candidates in a contest. They dined at the long table, their laughter rehearsed, their jewels glittering beneath the chandelier. They smiled at the girl, offering gifts, promises, and the kind of charm that only power could afford. Yet none of them saw the loneliness in her eyes, the quiet yearning for love without condition. But someone else did. She noticed it in passing glances, in the way the girl clutched her toys too tightly, in the way she lingered in the kitchen instead of the drawing room. The black housekeeper, always in the background, moved quietly through the home. She polished the silver, folded the linen, prepared the meals, and unknowingly became the one steady presence in the girl's life. She did not offer jewels or promises. She offered small things, a smile, a gentle word, the simple warmth of someone who cared. The daughter began to drift toward her in moments when no one was looking. A story told while bedsheets were tucked in, a comforting word after nightmares, a shared secret laugh in the echoing halls of the mansion. The housekeeper listened in ways no one else did. She saw the girl not as an heiress, but as a child, lonely, fragile, yearning for a hand to hold. The millionaire, however, did not notice. His eyes were fixed on the glittering image of the future, on alliances forged through marriage and wealth. To him, the 5 women represented security, status, and stability. He believed his daughter's choice would be simple, even obvious. But the girl was changing. Each day she began to see the difference between what was offered to her and what was given freely. She saw the cold sparkle of diamonds compared to the quiet warmth of kindness. She saw ambition painted across the faces of women who wanted her father's fortune, and compassion in the face of the woman who swept the floors. The storm had not yet come, but the air was heavy with it. The mansion, so proud in its silence, was about to become the stage for a decision no one expected. The mansion came alive in preparation for the coming choice. Servants polished every railing, the dining hall was adorned with fresh orchids, and the millionaire paced with the restless energy of a man who believed he was securing his legacy. He saw the process as a business deal, one that required precision. His daughter's decision, he believed, would honor his judgment. The 5 women arrived one by one, their cars gliding up the circular driveway like jewels on display. Each was announced with grandeur, stepping into the marble foyer with gowns that trailed across the floor. They greeted the millionaire with calculated smiles, and the daughter with carefully measured kindness. The girl received their attention politely, as she had been taught, but her heart remained distant. She watched them with wary eyes, sensing something hollow beneath their painted perfection. They were polished, rehearsed, dazzling, but their affection was like the shimmer of glass, bright on the surface, fragile underneath. At dinner, women spoke of their travels, their fortunes, their connections. They raised glasses of crystal and laughed at stories crafted to impress. The millionaire nodded approvingly, pleased at the elegance on display. But as the women spoke, the girl's eyes wandered past them, toward the kitchen door, where a quiet figure disappeared and reappeared, carrying trays, pouring drinks, clearing plates. The black housekeeper never spoke unless spoken to. Her movements were efficient, her presence subdued. Yet each time the girl's gaze found her, she felt something stir inside. When their eyes met briefly, there was no calculation, no performance, just recognition. Later that night, when the hall grew silent and the grand guests retreated to their rooms, the girl slipped quietly from her chamber. She padded down the staircase and found her in the kitchen, humming softly as she wiped the counters. The girl lingered in the doorway until the woman looked up and smiled, a tired but genuine smile that reached her eyes. "Can you tell me a story?" the girl asked in a whisper. And so she did. She spoke not of riches or power, but of simple things. Childhood games beneath the open sky, family gatherings filled with laughter, nights when hope was all they had. Her words painted a world far different from the one inside the mansion, yet warmer, truer, alive. The girl listened, her heart softening, her loneliness easing. This became their quiet ritual. While the millionaire prepared for a future bound by wealth, his daughter was drawn into a bond that grew in the shadows. The housekeeper became more than a servant. She became the voice that soothed nightmares, the hand that braided hair, the heart that understood. But whispers began to stir among the staff. They noticed the closeness, the stolen moments, the way the girl clung to the housekeeper's presence more than her father's promises. Some whispered with curiosity, others with disapproval. In a household where lines of class and color were rigid, the bond between the girl and the woman who served them was not only unusual, it was unsettling. The millionaire, however, remained blind. His focus was locked on appearances, on the grandeur of his plan. He paraded the women at luncheons, arranged outings, displayed them as if they were ornaments in a gallery. He believed his daughter would be swayed by the spectacle, that she would naturally choose from the wealthy candidates he approved. But the girl's heart was already leaning elsewhere. Each passing day, the distance between her and the glittering guests grew wider. Their laughter sounded shallow, their compliments rehearsed, their promises insincere. In contrast, every glance toward the housekeeper brought comfort, every whispered story brought trust, every act of kindness wove threads of love too strong to ignore. The stage was set, though no one could yet see it. Beneath the shining chandeliers, beneath the polished marble floors, beneath the weight of wealth and expectation, a decision was forming in the heart of a child. One that would not just defy her father's will, but challenge the very foundations of the world around them. The mansion had become a stage, and every day felt like a performance. The millionaire thrived in it, delighted by the attention his search for a new wife stirred in his wealthy circle. Friends whispered about his bold approach, critics questioned his methods, but he relished the spectacle. To him, it was proof of power. He could command admiration, envy, even scandal, and still come out triumphant. For his daughter, however, the days dragged like heavy curtains pulled across her spirit. She sat in the garden with the women, who complimented her dresses, brushed her hair, and spoke of the life she deserved. They spoke of expensive schools, of society galas, of yachts that would take her across oceans. But the more they spoke, the more she withdrew, clutching at the small truths she had discovered in the kitchen and the servants' quarters. The housekeeper, though she tried to remain in the background, felt the girl's presence gravitating toward her. Each day she sensed the child's unspoken plea for comfort, for something real in a house that was suffocating with performance. Yet she resisted, knowing her place. She had seen enough of the world to understand that stepping out of line could bring consequences she could not afford. But love, in its quiet persistence, often disregards rules. The girl began seeking her. At every chance, slipping into the laundry room, lingering in the hallways, sneaking moments in the garden when no one else was watching. She asked questions, innocent yet piercing, about life beyond the mansion's gates. The housekeeper answered carefully, never burdening the child with pain, but always weaving in honesty. She spoke of her own daughter, lost to illness years ago, whose absence had left a hollow ache that never fully healed. The girl listened with wide eyes, feeling a kinship deeper than she could explain. Meanwhile, the millionaire tightened his grip on the process. He organized a grand weekend gathering, inviting influential friends and potential allies. The 5 women, dressed in brilliance, became the centerpiece of attention. They competed quietly but fiercely, each aware that her future might be sealed by the daughter's choice. The girl was paraded among them like a prize to be won. Smiles followed her every move, compliments fell upon her like petals, and yet she felt none of it sink into her heart. Each hand that reached for her felt cold, each word rehearsed, each gaze more concerned with her father's fortune than her own soul. And still, through it all, the housekeeper was there, never noticed, never acknowledged, but always present. When the girl's shoulders slumped under the weight of expectation, the housekeeper's quiet glance lifted her. When her small hands trembled with nerves, the housekeeper's discreet touch steadied her. The other servants began to whisper more loudly now. They noticed the girl's preference, the subtle defiance of her attention. Some muttered warnings that such closeness would bring trouble. Others shook their heads, fearful of what would unfold if the millionaire discovered the truth. Yet the girl no longer cared for whispers. The mansion, once a place of pride, now felt like a prison of glass. Every reflection reminded her of the emptiness her father was trying to conceal with glitter. And every corner where she found the housekeeper felt like freedom, brief, stolen, but undeniably real. The weekend gathering ended with a formal dinner, more extravagant than any before. The millionaire raised a toast to the future, his voice booming with authority. The women smiled, their eyes gleaming, the guests applauded, and all seemed aligned with his plan. But in the quiet of that night, when the mansion slept and the echoes of laughter faded, the girl crept once again into the kitchen. The housekeeper was there, folding linen by lamplight. "Why do they smile but never see me?" the girl asked softly. The woman paused, her hands resting on the cloth. She looked at the child, her expression heavy with truth she could not speak aloud. Instead, she knelt beside her, brushing a stray curl from the girl's face. "Because some smiles are only for show," she whispered. "But some hearts see everything." The words sank deep, more powerful than any gift or promise she had received. In that moment, the girl knew her choice was already made. She did not want diamonds. She did not want titles. She wanted love. That was real. Love that had been quietly given in moments no one else valued. The storm was closer now. Though no thunder had sounded, the air trembled with the promise of it. The millionaire's pride, the women's ambition, the staff's whispers, all would soon collide with the decision forming silently in the heart of his daughter. The air inside the mansion grew heavier with each passing day. The millionaire's plan, once dazzling in his mind, began to show cracks. His daughter remained distant from the 5 women he had chosen, and though she followed the polite rituals expected of her, her eyes betrayed her disinterest. The women noticed. Their laughter grew sharper, their smiles tighter, and their attempts to win her favor became more desperate. One afternoon, during a tea gathering in the sunroom, one of the women leaned toward another and whispered, just loud enough for the servants to hear. "She seems more attached to the help than to us," she remarked, her tone laced with disdain. The other smirked. "Perhaps she doesn't know the difference." The words floated like poison through the air, overheard by the staff, repeated. In corridors, carried on hushed voices that twisted curiosity into suspicion. The housekeeper, though silent, felt the weight of it. She had long grown used to the sting of prejudice, to being seen as less, as invisible. But now the whispers turned toward the girl she had grown to love, and that was something she could not easily bear. The daughter, too young to understand the cruelty of such words, sensed the tension even if she did not yet name it. She noticed the way her friend's presence seemed to draw disapproving glances, the way conversations hushed when she entered the room holding the housekeeper's hand. She could not articulate the injustice, but she felt it pressing against her, trying to pull her away from the one bond that felt true. Meanwhile, the millionaire remained blind to the growing storm. He busied himself with business meetings and appearances, convinced that his daughter's reluctance was nothing more than childish hesitation. He believed time and pressure would bend her to his will, just as it had bent so many others in his life. He never considered that her heart might resist him, but resistance was growing, quietly, firmly, in the sanctuary of stolen moments. The girl clung tighter to the housekeeper's presence, seeking her comfort when the mansion's grandeur felt cold and empty. She found safety in the woman's steady voice, in her stories that spoke of courage, in her hands that worked tirelessly without complaint. It was during one such moment, late at night, that the girl asked the question that had been forming in her heart. "Would you be my mother if I asked you?" The housekeeper froze, the words cutting through her like a blade. She wanted to say yes, to gather the child in her arms and promise her the love she had long been denied. But reality pressed down, reminding her of the boundaries drawn by wealth, by power, by skin. She forced a soft smile, masking the storm inside her. "Some things are not mine to choose," she replied. But the girl was not satisfied. Her eyes, bright with determination, lingered on the woman's face, as though already carving her answer into stone. As days passed, the tension escalated. The women, frustrated by the child's aloofness, began to veil their contempt less carefully. They spoke of discipline, of how the girl needed firm guidance, of how indulgence had spoiled her. They hinted that her attachment to lowly company reflected poorly on her upbringing. Their words, sharp as glass, reached the millionaire's ears, though he dismissed them with irritation rather than reflection. To him, such talk was beneath consideration. Yet in the hearts of those who served, fear began to grow. They knew what such whispers could become. They had seen kindness punished, boundaries enforced with cruelty, affection crushed beneath the weight of prejudice. Some quietly urged the housekeeper to distance herself, to protect herself from the storm they felt approaching. But how could she turn away from a child who looked at her not with judgment, but with love? The mansion's walls, once symbols of pride, now held the quiet dread of an impending reckoning. The girl's decision, once imagined as a simple matter of choosing among her father's approved women, had transformed into something far more dangerous. The night of the final choice drew near, and though no thunder rolled outside, everyone within those walls felt the storm pressing closer. The night of the grand announcement drew closer, and the mansion buzzed with anticipation. Guests were invited, menus prepared, and the 5 wealthy women polished their smiles as if sharpening weapons. The millionaire imagined it would be the crowning moment of his plan, his daughter selecting a new mother before an audience that mattered most. But cracks had already split the polished veneer. The whispers that once crept behind closed doors now edged into the open. Servants exchanged uneasy glances when the girl clung to the housekeeper's hand. The wealthy women, once careful with their disdain, allowed their voices to harden. "She cannot keep spending her time with that woman," one said sharply, as the girl entered the garden. "It reflects poorly on the family." Another smirked. Imagine what society would say if such nonsense were tolerated. The girl understood more now. The contempt was no longer hidden, and though she could not name the poison, she could taste its bitterness. She saw how eyes narrowed when the housekeeper poured drinks, how voices dripped with mockery when they referred to her as the help. The girl's heart tightened with anger, but her small frame carried no power to silence them. The housekeeper bore it with the quiet strength of someone who had endured such cruelties her entire life. She lowered her gaze, kept her hands busy, and swallowed each insult as if it were nothing new. But inside the words burned. She could bear her own pain, but not the child's confusion, not the innocence slowly bruising beneath prejudice. One evening, as preparations reached their peak, the millionaire noticed his daughter slipping from the dining hall into the servants' wing. His pride swelled with irritation. He followed, striding down the corridor with the authority of a man unused to defiance. He found her sitting at the kitchen table, listening intently as the housekeeper told a story of her childhood beneath a sky filled with stars. "What is the meaning of this?" His voice thundered, startling them both. The girl looked up, startled but unashamed. The housekeeper rose to her feet, bowing her head, ready to accept whatever reprimand would come. "I was only—" she began, but he cut her off with a sharp wave of his hand. "You will remember your place," he snapped, his eyes narrowing on her before shifting to his daughter. "And you will remember yours. This is not where you belong." The girl's eyes filled with tears, but her chin lifted. With a courage that startled even her father, "She listens to me," she said softly, her voice trembling but resolute. "She cares." The millionaire's face hardened. He saw her words not as truth, but as rebellion, a challenge to his authority. He stormed away, leaving behind a silence. thicker than stone. The housekeeper touched the girl's hand, whispering comfort, though her own heart trembled with fear. Word of the confrontation spread quickly through the household. The wealthy women seized on it like vultures. They whispered of impropriety, of danger, of how scandalous it would be if the child's preference continued. They cornered the millionaire in private, their voices laced with false concern. She must be guided, one insisted. It would ruin everything if people thought she favored someone like that, another pressed, her tone dripping with venom. The millionaire, torn between irritation and pride, dismissed their warnings outwardly, but their words festered in his mind. He told himself it was absurd, impossible, that his daughter would never truly choose the housekeeper. And yet, he had seen the look in her eyes, the defiance that reminded him of his late wife, the stubbornness that wealth could not bend. The storm gathered quickly. What began as whispers had grown into warnings, and warnings would soon turn into open conflict. The girl, fragile yet unyielding, stood at the center, clinging to a love that the world around her had already decided she did not deserve. The days leading up to the announcement unfolded like a test the girl never agreed to take. Every moment, she was ushered before the 5 women, her father watching closely, waiting for signs of preference. They showered her with gifts, jeweled hairpins, silken dresses, books bound in leather. She accepted them with politeness, but her heart remained unmoved. Her real treasures were not wrapped in ribbons. They were the quiet moments in the kitchen where the housekeeper braided her hair with steady hands, or the evenings when she sat at the woman's feet as stories drifted like lullabies. Those moments gave her a sense of home that marble halls and chandeliers never could, but the world around them grew sharper. At a luncheon filled with family friends, one of the wealthy women placed a manicured hand on the girl's shoulder, leaning in as if to share a secret. "You are far too important," she said with a smile stretched thin, "to waste your affection on servants. A girl of your standing should look upward, not downward." The words, though spoken sweetly, struck with venom. The girl's cheeks burned as laughter rippled among the table, disguised as casual conversation but heavy with cruelty. She wanted to shout, to defend the one person who made her feel seen, but her small voice was trapped beneath the weight of so many eyes. The housekeeper, standing at the edge of the room with a tray in hand, heard every word. She kept her gaze low, her posture unbroken, though her heart ached with shame. Not for herself, she was used to bearing insults, but for the child forced to endure them. Later that evening, in the quiet of her room, the girl wept. The housekeeper held her close, whispering soft reassurances, though each tear cut like glass. "Why are they so cruel?" the girl asked through sobs. The woman brushed the hair from her face and kissed her brow gently. "Because some hearts are blind," she whispered. "But blindness cannot erase what you know to be true." The words sank deep, but so too did the wound. The girl began to understand that love was not measured equally in the world. Some bonds were celebrated, others were scorned, and the bond she cherished most seemed destined to be despised. The following week, another humiliation struck. During a formal dinner, the housekeeper approached to refill glasses when one of the women deliberately shifted her chair, forcing her to stumble slightly. The action drew a chorus of gasps, followed by mocking laughter disguised as polite amusement. "Careful," one woman said sharply. "Clumsy hands have no place at a table like this." The girl's eyes blazed with fury, but the housekeeper steadied herself, offered a quiet apology, and carried on. Her dignity, though bruised, remained intact, but the cruelty did not go unnoticed. The girl's anger only deepened, her resolve hardening like stone. The millionaire, however, saw none of this. Or rather, he chose not to. His pride was anchored to the spectacle he was orchestrating. He believed his daughter's choice would validate him, restore order, and silence whispers. He did not see the storm building in her small but determined heart. Behind the scenes, the house staff grew divided. Some admired the bond between the child and the housekeeper, whispering of its purity and truth. Others shook their heads, warning that no good could come of it. They spoke of consequences, of punishments, of what the world outside those walls would do if such a choice were ever voiced aloud. The girl, though shielded from their words, felt the shift in the air. She could not name prejudice, but she recognized rejection. She saw it in the sneers, in the cutting remarks, in the way her beloved housekeeper was treated as invisible until it was convenient to wound her. And each day, as the final announcement drew nearer, her heart whispered the same answer. She knew whom she would choose no matter the cost, but the cost was coming, swift and merciless. And when it arrived, it would test not only her innocence, but the very courage of love itself. The evening of the gala arrived, a night meant to showcase the millionaire's triumph. Guests filled the mansion, their voices echoing beneath vaulted ceilings, their jewels flashing like stars under the chandeliers. The 5 women moved gracefully through the crowd, each vying for attention, each imagining the crown of victory placed upon her head once the daughter made her choice. The millionaire beamed with pride. Tonight, he believed, would mark the end of his daughter's mourning and the beginning of a new chapter under his control. He watched her closely, expecting her to bend under the weight of expectation. But his daughter's eyes searched for someone else entirely. Amidst the dazzling gowns and polished shoes, her gaze found the housekeeper standing discreetly at the edge of the room, carrying a tray with the same quiet dignity as always. In that moment, surrounded by opulence, the girl felt the cruel distance between what the world celebrated and what her heart longed for. The evening progressed with rehearsed elegance, speeches made, glasses raised, laughter flowing freely. Yet beneath the glitter, unease simmered. The girl's aloofness was noticed by all. She smiled faintly at the women's efforts, but her gaze drifted again and again toward the one figure who offered no performance, no jewels, no polished charm. It was during dinner that the storm finally broke. One of the wealthy women, frustrated by the child's indifference, leaned close to her with a voice loud enough for others to hear. "My dear, you mustn't cling to servants," she said with a tight smile. "It makes you look less than you are." The words struck the air like a whip. Conversations faltered. All eyes turned toward the girl, who sat frozen, her cheeks burning. The housekeeper, nearby with a pitcher in hand, lowered her gaze, praying the moment would pass. But the girl did not let it. She pushed back her chair with a sharp scrape against the marble floor. Her small voice, trembling yet fierce, cut through the silence. "She is not less," she said, her eyes blazing with defiance. "She is more than any of you." Gasps rippled across the table. The wealthy women exchanged looks of shock, their painted smiles shattering. Guests whispered, scandal buzzing like a swarm of bees. The millionaire's face turned red, his pride wounded before the very audience he sought to impress. "Enough!" his voice thundered, slamming the table with his palm. The glasses trembled, the candles flickered. He glared at his daughter with fury, his authority challenged in the most humiliating way, but the girl did not retreat. Tears welled in her eyes, yet her chin lifted. "She cares for me," she declared, her small hands clenched at her sides. "Not for money, not for power. She cares for me." The room fell into stunned silence. The housekeeper stood frozen, her heart pounding, knowing the consequences such words would bring. To be defended openly, to be elevated above those society deemed superior, it was a challenge to the very order the mansion was built upon. The millionaire rose to his feet, his voice trembling with rage. "You do not understand what you say," he barked. "You embarrass yourself, and you embarrass me." But the girl's words had already broken the dam. The guests' whispers swelled into a storm. Some muttered in disgust, others in disbelief. A few, quieter voices admired her courage, though they dared not speak it aloud. The housekeeper, trembling, reached for the girl's hand under the table, trying to steady her. But even her touch could not shield the child from what would come. The night, meant to celebrate control, had instead unveiled rebellion, and with it, the full weight of prejudice would soon come crashing down. The mansion was no longer a home, but a battlefield. After the gala, its halls rang not with laughter, but with echoes of anger. The millionaire's pride had been torn before, the eyes of his peers, and humiliation festered like a wound he could not ignore. He summoned his daughter to the grand study, its towering shelves and heavy oak desk looming like a court of judgment. She stood small before him, her hands clasped, her eyes still swollen from the night before. The housekeeper was nowhere to be seen, banished from the room, forbidden to stand at her side. "You have disgraced me," the millionaire's voice thundered, his fists slamming against the desk. "Before friends, before business partners, before the entire world, you chose to shame your own blood." The girl's voice trembled, but her courage did not waver. "I spoke the truth." The truth. His laughter was bitter, sharp. "You call it truth to raise a servant above your family, to speak her name as if she belongs in the place of your mother. She cares for me," the girl said softly, "more than any of them ever will." The words struck him harder than any blade. For a moment his fury faltered into disbelief. Then, with renewed rage, he stood tall, his shadow casting over her. "You will forget her. You will choose among the women I've brought, and you will never again disgrace me with such nonsense." Tears spilled down her cheeks, but her defiance blazed brighter. "I will never choose them. I already know who my mother is." The silence that followed was suffocating. The millionaire's jaw clenched, his pride crumbling under the weight of her words. His empire, his control, his carefully constructed image, all of it trembled because of a child's loyalty to a woman he deemed unworthy. That evening, his wrath spread further. The housekeeper was summoned to the study, where he unleashed his fury. He accused her of poisoning his daughter's mind, of overstepping her place, of daring to believe she could ever be more than what the world had assigned her. She bowed her head, her voice steady but broken. "I never sought to replace anyone. I only cared for her as she needed." "Cared for her?" His voice dripped with venom. "You have infected her with your delusions, and for that, you will leave this house." The decree fell like thunder. The girl, listening outside the heavy doors, gasped in horror. She burst in, clutching at her father's arm with desperate hands. "No, you cannot take her from me." The millionaire pulled her away, his face a mask of stone. "You will learn. You will understand your place, and hers." The housekeeper's eyes filled with tears, not for herself, but for the child who clung to her. She reached out, brushing the girl's cheek one last time, before servants dragged her away. "Be strong," she whispered. "Love is never wrong." The mansion erupted in chaos. The daughter screamed, her voice echoing through the corridors, her sobs shattering the stillness of the night. The women whispered in triumph, their painted smiles curling with satisfaction. The staff watched in silence, some with pity, others with fear, knowing the storm had broken beyond repair. For days, the girl refused to eat, refused to speak, her spirit crushed, but her will unbroken. She sat by the window, staring into the gardens where she once shared stolen moments of laughter. Her father's attempts to coax her were met with silence. The gifts he offered lay untouched. And then came the night of the final decision, the event that was to crown his plan. Guests filled the hall once more, the 5 women dressed in brilliance, the millionaire standing tall at the head of the room. He declared that his daughter would choose her new mother at last, that the future of his household would be secured. But when the girl stepped forward, her small frame trembling beneath the weight of so many eyes, her voice rang with clarity no one expected. "I choose her," she said, her voice piercing the silence. "I choose the one you sent away. I choose the woman who loves me, the black housekeeper." Gasps thundered through the hall. The women's faces twisted with shock, the guests erupted in whispers of scandal, and the millionaire's face turned pale with fury. His empire shook, in that single moment, undone by the voice of a child who dared to defy the chains of prejudice. The words hung in the air like lightning frozen in time. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the storm broke. Gasps rippled through the hall, whispers rising into sharp voices, scandals spreading like wildfire among the guests. The 5 women stiffened in outrage, their painted smiles dissolving into open contempt. Some clutched their pearls, others exchanged knowing looks of mockery, and a few, hidden at the back, watched in stunned silence, unable to decide if they were witnessing courage or catastrophe. The millionaire's face hardened, his pride crumbling before the eyes of those whose approval he craved most. His hands trembled against the polished wood of the table as he struggled to contain his fury. "You dare!" he hissed, his voice barely more than a growl, yet carrying enough venom to silence the room. "You dare humiliate me like this?" The girl's chin trembled, but her voice was steady. "I dare to speak the truth," murmurs. Surged louder. Unthinkable. A disgrace. Choosing a servant over women of standing? The words swirled through the hall like daggers, each one cutting deeper into the millionaire's pride. At the far end of the room, the housekeeper had been summoned back, forced to stand in the shadows. Her heart pounded as the child spoke her name before everyone. She wanted to run, to silence the storm before it consumed them both, but her feet were rooted. Tears filled her eyes as she realized the girl had chosen love despite the world's cruelty. The millionaire's fury erupted. He slammed his fist onto the table, the sound echoing like thunder. Guests flinched, glasses toppled, the candles quivered. "You shame your mother's memory," he roared. "You shame this family, this house, everything I have built, but—" The girl stood tall, her small frame radiating defiance. "Mother's memory lives in love, not in money," she whispered, her voice shaking yet unbreakable. The room froze. Those words, fragile yet piercing, cut deeper than any blade. The millionaire staggered, struck not only by rebellion but by truth. He saw in his daughter's eyes the same fire his late wife once carried, the same refusal to bow to cruelty. Yet, pride would not let him yield. Pride demanded control, demanded punishment. "Enough," he thundered. "This ends tonight. She will never be your mother. You will forget her, or you will cease to be my daughter." The hall gasped again. The threat of disownment was no longer whispered. It was declared openly, with the weight of finality. The women smiled faintly in triumph, believing the storm had crushed the child's defiance. But the girl's voice rose once more, trembling but clear. "Then I will not be your daughter." The silence that followed was heavier than stone. Guests looked on in disbelief, some shaking their heads, others whispering of madness. The millionaire's face drained of color, his empire collapsing in the span of a breath. The housekeeper, unable to hold back, rushed forward, falling to her knees before him. "Please," she begged, her voice breaking. "Do not punish her for loving me. Take your anger out on me if you must. But she is just a child." Her plea was met with contempt. He turned his gaze on her, filled with all the hatred society had taught him to wield. "You," he spat, "have poisoned her. You, with your place, your skin, your lies, you have turned her against me." The hall bristled with prejudice, his words echoing the beliefs many carried in silence. The condemnation was not only his, but theirs as well, and the housekeeper bore the weight of centuries in that moment. But the girl stepped forward, clutching the woman's hand tightly. "No," she cried. "She gave me love when no one else did. She gave me the mother you wanted me to forget. If love is poison, then I will drink it every day." Her words shattered the hall. Some gasped in horror, others turned their eyes away, unwilling to watch. But none could deny the courage blazing in that child's heart. The millionaire, trembling with fury and humiliation, shouted for the guards. "Take her away, both of them, out of my sight." Servants hesitated, torn between obedience and conscience. But under the force of his command, they stepped forward. The housekeeper clutched the girl, shielding her as the hall erupted into chaos. Women shrieking, guests whispering, the child's cries echoing through the gilded walls. And so, in the house of wealth and power, love was dragged into the shadows, beaten not by truth, but by pride. Yet even as they were pulled apart, the girl's voice rang out, fierce and unyielding. "You cannot erase love. You cannot take her from me." The words lingered long after the doors slammed shut, echoing through the halls like a prophecy. The mansion fell into silence after that night, but it was not peace. It was the hollow quiet of loss. The girl's cries had faded into echoes, yet every corner seemed haunted by them. She no longer laughed, no longer played. Her toys lay untouched, her meals went cold. She wandered the halls like a ghost, her small figure swallowed by the weight of grief. The housekeeper was gone, sent away with no farewell, no chance to hold her once more. The girl searched for her in every shadow, listened for her voice in every breeze but found only emptiness. Her father's victory tasted of ashes, his triumph poisoned by the very silence he had created. He watched her from a distance, expecting time to heal, expecting gifts and comforts to mend what was broken. But none of it reached her. His wealth could not replace the warmth she had lost. His authority could not command her heart. The realization gnawed at him in secret, though his pride kept him from speaking it aloud. Whispers spread beyond the mansion walls. Guests who had witnessed the confrontation carried the scandal into society. Some condemned him for allowing such disgrace to unfold. Others mocked his failure to control even his own child. Business associates questioned his judgment. What was meant to be a show of power had instead revealed weakness, and in the world of wealth, weakness was unforgivable. Meanwhile, the housekeeper tried to rebuild her life in silence. She carried her pain quietly, as she always had, working where work could be found, her thoughts never straying far from the child she loved. At night, she would close her eyes and remember the girl's laughter, the way her small hands had clung to hers, the fearless words she had spoken in defiance of the world. Those memories gave her strength, even as they tore her apart. Weeks passed. The girl grew thinner, her spirit dimmer. At last, even the millionaire could not ignore it. The empire he had built, the respect he demanded, all of it meant nothing against the hollow eyes of his daughter. He realized with dread that he had won society's approval, but lost her heart. And in that moment, pride faltered. Late one night, when the house was cloaked in silence, he entered her room. She sat by the window, staring into the darkness beyond the glass, her small hands pressed against the pane as though reaching for something far away. He stood there, silent, uncertain, stripped of the power he had once wielded so easily. Finally, he spoke, his voice softer than she had ever heard. "What do you need?" Her answer came without hesitation. Her. The word pierced him deeper than any insult ever could. He turned away, fighting the pride that rose like chains around his heart. But even he could not deny the truth any longer. No wealth, no ambition, no plan could ever replace love freely given. And so, with the weight of a man who had built his life on control, he made the choice he had long resisted. The housekeeper was found, her presence requested once more. When she entered the mansion, her steps hesitant, her eyes wary, the girl ran into her arms with a cry that shattered the silence at last. Tears flowed freely as the two clung together, their bond unbroken despite the storm. For the first time, the millionaire saw what had been in front of him all along. Not scandal, not shame, but love pure and unyielding. It was a love his wealth could never buy, a love that defied prejudice, a love his daughter had chosen with courage far beyond her years. And though the world outside still whispered, though society still frowned, he could no longer deny it. In the quiet of that reunion, he bowed his head, not in defeat, but in surrender to a truth greater than pride. Love had won.